Mitchell coming to you live from my YouTube channel. I continue on my part series, the professional sports teams that didn't win a championship during that season, part 63. And I'll be talking about today is the 1997 Green Bay Packers. Rightfully so. I remember this team, obviously. This is a team that was the defending champions going into the 1997 season. And they won their second consecutive NFC Championship game. They beat the 49ers 23-10. They beat Buccaneers 21-7. Divisional playoffs. They won the conference championship in the NFC to beating the 49ers. But they lost to the John Elway and Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 32. That's the game where Terrell Davis had like 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. That was no upset because at that time the NFC was dominating the AFC for a long period of time. You gotta go back to Super Bowl 18. Last time the AFC team won a Super Bowl. From like Super Bowl 19 when the 49ers beat the Dolphins all the way to Super Bowl 31. It was all about the NFC. The NFC was the dominant conference, and I think part of it, you had great coaches, you had great teams. The majority of those teams that won those Super Bowls were all-time great teams. The majority of them, when you really look at it. Some were good, but most of them were really, really, great, dominant. That's the stranglehold that the NFC had on the AFC in terms of Super Bowls. They won 12 straight Super Bowls, I believe. So this team, the Packers, could not extend that streak because they lost to the Denver Broncos. So, 1997 Green Bay Packers had a great season. They were 13-3. Even some of the players, like during training camp, many expected the Packers to repeat, and rightfully so. Had Brett Favre, had Dorsey Levens, had Antonio Freeman. Not household names, but he can make plays. Robert Brooks, Mark Chmura, had Reggie White on defense, Roy Butler on defense. So you had talented players on that squad. And when you look at during training camp, according to the research, star safety Leroy Butler, among others, said that the Packers had the chance to run the table and go 19-0. But that hype ended quickly when they lost to Philadelphia. Now they got to a slow start. They were 3-2, but they got hot in the second half. They went 13-0, 8-0 at home for the second consecutive year. The NFC title game was the real Super Bowl between the 49ers and the Packers. Not surprised with that, due to the fact that the AFC was not doing so well in recent Super Bowls. So they handled their business, except AFC had lost 13 consecutive Super Bowls, including Denver. They was part of those losses. They lost 4 Super Bowls. Now, Brett Favre was the MVP in '97. Robert Brooks was National Football League Comeback Player of the Year. Brett Favre was on another level. He threw 35 touchdowns. He was a great player at that time. So, what we're going to do is talk about the Super Bowl. And the 1997, I'm going to come back and focus on Super Bowl 32. Super Bowl 32. Was a Super Bowl where the Denver Broncos upset the Green Bay Packers 31-24. It was the first league championship after suffering 4 previous Super Bowl losses, second a 13-game losing streak for the AFC teams in the Super Bowl. Again, you gotta go back to Super Bowl 18. I believe that was Super Bowl 18, where they lost. I mean, the Raiders beat the Redskins in 1983. So let's look into this. The Broncos entered the game after posting a 12-4 regular season record. In 1997, they became just the second wild card team to win a Super Bowl, and the first since the Raiders in Super Bowl 15. The Packers entered the Super Bowl 32. Defending champions had a 13-3 record. They were the first team favored to win by double digits to lose the Super Bowl since Super Bowl 4. Yeah, I believe Super Bowl 4. Yeah. Yeah, Super Bowl 4. Right. So the game was close throughout the contest, but the Broncos converted 2 turnovers to take a 17-7 lead in the second quarter before the Packers cut the score to 17-14 at halftime. Green Bay kept pace with Denver in the second half before tying the game with 13:31 to go. Both defenses stiffened until Broncos running back Terrell Davis scored the go-ahead touchdown with 1:45 left. Davis had 157 yards rushing, caught 2 passes for 8 yards. He scored 3 touchdowns rushing in the Super Bowl. That's a Super Bowl record. So, in the first quarter, Antonio Freeman returned the kickoff 19 yards to the Green Bay 24-yard line. Brett Favre on the field by completing a 13-yard pass to Freeman on 3rd down and 9. Those 11s rushed the ball on 3 consecutive plays, gaining 27 yards to advance to Denver 35-yard line. Favre finished the drive with 2 completions to Freeman. The first one for 13 yards. The second one, a 22-yard touchdown pass to give the Packers a 7-0 lead. And the Packers were the 3rd team to take the opening kickoff down the field and score a touchdown on that drive. And the other two Super Bowls was Miami and Super Bowl 8, the San Francisco 49ers and Super Bowl 29. So 7-0 is in favor of the Packers. But the Broncos responded because Von Hebron returned a kickoff 32 yards to their own 42-yard line. And Terrell Davis took over. He ran the ball 27 yards to the 14-yard line. That was before that. On 3rd down, you had Doug Evans of the Packers defensive back was called for holding, and they gave the Broncos a 1st down. And this game was all about Terrell Davis, man. He's the reason why the Broncos won that Super Bowl. It wasn't because of John Elway. No disrespect to him. Terrell Davis is the guy. Okay. After a 2-yard run by Davis, Elway scrambled 10 yards to gain a 1st down at the 2-yard line. Then Davis capped off a 10-play, 58-yard drive with a 1-yard touchdown run to tie the game. Now this is to date the only Super Bowl in which both teams scored touchdowns on their opening drives. So on second play of the Packers' next possession, Denver defensive back Teron Braxton intercepted a pass by Brett Favre at the Green Bay's 45-yard line, aided by 5 runs by Davis for 29 yards. The Broncos marched 45 yards to score on Elway's 1-yard touchdown run on the first play of the second quarter, taking a 14-7 lead. Now this also was a Super Bowl where Davis had a migraine headache that impaired his vision. So, second quarter, Denver take a 17-7 lead on the Jason Elam field goal. At that time, it was 51 yards and the second longest Super Bowl field goal in history. But the Packers went 95 yards on 17 plays. And Brett Favre threw a touchdown pass to Marshall Moore with just 12 seconds left to cut the lead to 17-14. So that was a huge drive for the Packers at that time because they was trailing 17-7. So now we go to the second half. On the first play after the kickoff, Tyrone Williams forced a recovery from Davis. Green Bay took possession with good field position at the Broncos' 26-yard line to begin the second half. But Denver's defense forced a 3-and-out. However, on the ensuing field goal attempt, Denver's special teams were called outsides, so it gave the Packers a first and 10, a second first and 10 at the Broncos' 15-yard line. So the Broncos defense forced a second 3 and out in the back-to-back possessions, so stalling the Packers' drive at the 9-yard line, forcing them to settle for a 27-yard Ryan Longwell field goal to make it 17-17 tie ball game. So Denver went on a 92-yard, 13-play drive to regain the lead. It was aided by a 36-yard reception by Ed McCaffrey. Broncos advanced to the Green Bay 12-yard line on 3rd and 6 from the 12-yard line. Elway scrambled for an 8-yard run, dove for the first down, a play in which was hit hard by Mike Pryor. He spun sideways. It was known as the helicopter. It was one of the defining moments in the Super Bowl history in Elway's career. This was Super Bowl 32. And then Davis scored another touchdown to make it 24-17 from 1 yard out. So now the Packers guys, scored it, get it tied up. But on the ensuing kickoff, Antonio Freeman fumbled, and it was recovered by Tim McKay at the 22-yard line. So the Broncos immediately tried to capitalize on the turnover by trying a quick strike touchdown pass, but was intercepted by Eugene Robinson, who returned it to the 15-yard line. So after the interception, Packers marched 85 yards on 4 straight pass completions. 3 of them receptions by Freeman to tie the game once again at 128 into the 4th quarter with Freeman's 13-yard touchdown catch. On the scoring play, Freeman and Robert Brooks ran a crisscross pattern with Freeman on the inside running towards the sidelines. So Denver defensive back Darian Gordon hesitated as to which receiver to cover, and Favre hit Freeman for the score, tying the game at 24-24. So the Broncos, with 3:27 left, Darius Howland, the linebacker of the Packers, had committed a 15-yard face mask penalty while tackling Davis on a 2-yard run. So that moved the ball to the 32-yard line. And also give credit to the defense of the Broncos, because before the possession that the Denver Broncos had on offense, they forced a 3 and out. A 5th critical 3 and out in the second half. That's something that's very important, because again, you got Brett Favre, the MVP, and you got the defending champion Packers, and they just couldn't get it done with the game on the line and the balance. The Broncos was able to step up their defense and force a 5th critical 3 and out in the second half. 5 critical 3 and outs in the second half. That's very impressive. So back to the drive that Denver had to take the lead. 2 plays later, John Elway completed a 23-yard pass to fullback Howard Griffith, aided by a powerful block by Ed McCaffrey. A holding penalty pushed the Broncos back to the 18-yard line, but then Davis rushed 17 yards to the 1-yard line, and the Broncos called timeout. So this left the Broncos facing second and goal with 1:47 left on the clock. So Green Bay had 2 timeouts remaining. Mike Holmgren told his team to let the Broncos score to maximize the time the Packers would have on the clock for a potential game-time drive. So he admitted later that he had thought that it was first and goal rather than second and goal, which is a crucial distinction in clock management decision-making on the play. So Terrell Davis then scored his 3rd rushing touchdown on second and goal, leaving 1:45 left on the clock. Now the Broncos had a 1-touchdown lead, 31-24. So here comes the Packers. They attempted one final drive to tie the game before the end of the regulation and send the contest into overtime. Shanahan famously instructed his defensive coordinators to keep playing the same blitzing defense they done throughout the game as Green Bay attempted to drive downfield in the final 2 minutes rather than playing prevent defense. So Freeman returned the Broncos kickoff 22 yards to the 30-yard line. So on the very first play of the drive, the Packers advanced to the Broncos 48-yard line with a 22-yard screen pass, even though with the 1:30 still to go in the game and 2 timeouts. But following the first pass, rather than use of the timeouts, the Packers hurried to the line of scrimmage and ran a second consecutive screen pass. The pass was complete. The receiver was stopped. Okay. The play cost the Packers 19 seconds, leaving 1:11 on the game clock and also forcing the Packers to take one of their 2 timeouts. So in the next play, Favre completed another pass to Levens. Levens picked up 13 yards. Was able to run out of bounds. The clock stopped at 1:04 left in the game. 1:04 left in the game, the clock stopped. So the Packers had first and 10 at the Broncos 35-yard line, with 1 timeout remaining. The Broncos defense would stop the Packers on the next 4 downs on a 4th down play. Favre completed a 4-yard pass to Levens, but he was stopped in bounds. The Packers hurried to the line, but 20 seconds ran off before Favre could attempt a second pass. Second down, Favre attempted to pass downfield that hit receiver Antonio Freeman in both hands and chest at the Broncos 15. But Freeman could not handle the ball because the incomplete pass stopped the clock. So the Packers had 36 and now on 37 seconds left. Favre intended to pass for receiver Robert Brooks and covered by Denver's Randy Hilliard. Both were blasted by Atwood delivering a seismic hit, and the pass was incomplete. All 3 players were knocked out of the game. Because of NFL rules regarding injuries to the players in the final 2 minutes of the game, both teams were charged a timeout since the players had both teams that were injured when they intended to. So all came down to a 4th and 6. Packers facing that ball on the 31-yard line. No timeouts. 32 seconds remaining. 4th down. Linebacker of Denver Broncos, John Moley, broke up the pass, sent for Tremora, enabling the Broncos to take the ball back and run out the clock for the victory. And Packers lost the Super Bowl. The thing about this game too, from a defensive standpoint for the Green Bay Packers who lost this game, is that Reggie White, Gilbert Brown, Leroy Butler, and others were able to register a sack against the offensive line of the Broncos. John Elway had pedestrian numbers, didn't play great. 123 yards, 1 interception. Again, this was all about Terrell Davis, man. He won this game. Somehow because of what he did in the running game. Anyway, he became the 6th player to score touchdowns in the 3 different Super Bowls, joining Lynn Swann, Franco Harris, Thurman Thomas, Jerry Rice, and Emmitt Smith. He also was the 2nd leading rusher behind Davis with 17 yards on touchdown and a touchdown on 5 carries. Terrell Davis became the only player to rush for 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. The only non-San Francisco 49er to score 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl was Roger Craig, Jerry Rice, and Ricky Waters. For the Packers, Dorsis Levens had 90 yards rushing. Second lead received 56 yards on 6 receptions. Freeman and Favre played outstanding. In defeat, Favre was 25, 42, 256 yards and 3 touchdowns with 1 interception. Freeman caught 9 passes for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns, gained 104 yards on 6 kickoff returns, giving him 230 total yards. Freeman tied himself for 2nd all-time in touchdown catches, tied for 2nd to all-time touchdown catches in the Super Bowl with 3, joining Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, and Cliff Branch, trailing only Jerry Rice's 8 touchdown catches. He also became just the 3rd player to have at least 100 yards receiving in back-to-back Super Bowls, joining Rice and Stallworth. Denver was the first team with the 0-2 record in Super Bowl to win. The record had been 0-4. The Broncos' victory snapped the NFC 13-game winning streak in the Super Bowl. The Broncos were the first AFC team to win the Super Bowl since Los Angeles Raiders beat the Redskins in Super Bowl 18. Denver also became the first team to score on 4 one-yard touchdown runs. The Packers became the 3rd defending Super Bowl champion to lose the Super Bowl, joining Dallas Cowboys, Washington Redskins. Later would be joined by Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots. That's basically it, man. So I want to get back to what I was going to read, what I was going to talk about. Okay. Okay, bear with me for a second. Okay, Brett Favre was named the league's MVP for the third straight year in a row. That's how great Brett Favre was at that time. Brett Favre was the first player in the history of the award to win 3 MVPs. He remains the only player to have won 3 consecutive MVP awards, and the Packers became the first team to have 6 NFL MVP award winners. Also, the 1997 Packers are one of only 2 teams in NFL history to win 7 games against teams that will go on to make the playoffs. So that's interesting right there. So that concludes a look at best professional sports teams, professional sports teams that didn't win a championship during that season. Part 63, the 1997 Green Bay Packers. Please like and subscribe to the channel, comment. Tomorrow I'll do a video of this magnitude tomorrow. Until then, talk to you tomorrow. This concludes a video about professional sports teams that didn't win a championship during that season. This is Part 63, the 1997 Green Bay Packers. Until then, talk to you tomorrow.